In 2020, I hiked to the highest peak in Scotland, Ben Nevis, and it practically finished me off where my legs ached for days after. In 2021, I then hiked to the highest peak in Wales, Snowdon, and by the time we got to the top, I was actually shocked because it was so much easier than what I expected. By the time we got to the bottom, we actually went for another wander up to a different waterfall. The year is 2022, and so it seems apt that it's England's turn, and today we are going to attempt getting up to the top of Scafell Pike. This morning we've come along to Seathwaite to hike up to Scafell Pike from the northern side of the mountain, which is the slightly less used route. We were able to park up in lay-by parking, and there seemed to be a lot of it whilst there were cars parked up. We actually managed to get the very end spot closest to the trailhead, but if it does get full, there is a farm here that has a car park too. On a summer's day like today, the stream's really quite pretty and it's just trickling on down with a few waterfalls, but you can tell just from the big chunks of earth that have obviously been swept away. When it gets to winter, and particularly after heavy rains, this must be quite a raging torrent of a river. This area isn't just home to the highest peak in England, but it's also home to the wettest part of England, which explains probably why there are so many streams that we seem to have to crisscross over, and so many tumbling waterfalls too. The weather is incredibly humid this morning, and then I think throw in the fact that we are walking up streams and alongside pools of water, it's just adding to the level of humidity. I've got so many layers in my backpack because I'm expecting that the top is probably going to be very cold, but right now I'm right down to my absolute base layer. The route that we're taking up, I think, is what's known as the corridor route, and this I'm assuming must be the corridor just because of the hills on either side, but to me this is what I would describe as being a valley. So I was just wondering if anyone who's watching this knows why it's called the corridor as opposed to a valley. A very obvious pathway has then led us into this boulder field. Thankfully the boulders are all very much ingrained into the earth, so it's not like any of them are rocky where you could then fall over easily, but because it's not obvious where the trail goes, there is just the biggest cairn I think I've ever seen before that you can head towards in foggy and cloudy weather. As we crossed over the footbridge, you could see the tourist path from the southern side of the fells winding up the mountain. And Andy followed it with his line of eyesight and was able to then spot the trig point at the top. So that's always a really nice feeling, being able to see where you're headed to. And it doesn't actually feel quite as daunting from this height as what the mountains did a couple of days ago when we were at Buttermere. We've just skirted past Styehead Tarn. I think it would have been a lovely place to stop for some 11sies had it been anywhere near 11 o'clock and we were hungry, but unfortunately it's a lot earlier. I am also wondering if maybe when we come back down at the end, if people who've been out hiking for most of the day might be swimming in that. I think we're at the point of having done about 450 metres of elevation gain, although we have just come up over a ridge and then we've lost some elevation slightly as we've gone into the next valley. But given that this peak is at 978 metres, we've made quite a big dent on the elevation. It's not 11 o'clock yet, but my tummy is gurgling away because I'm super hungry, and also I think because of the elevation gain, it means that the air has definitely gotten a lot colder, so I think the fleece needs to go back on. I've seen a few dog walkers out on this, and I'm thinking this is sketchy enough for me as a human. I would not have wanted to have brought Sam, my brother's dog, if we were needing to do this. It's kind of scary. One wrong step and it could be deadly. I was just saying, this is really beautiful. I think online a lot of people kind of knock Scafell Pike, and I get it. I mean, I've not finished doing the hike, but from what I've seen today, I'm not going to say, oh, it's the best hike that I've ever done in the Lake District. But I felt like online, a lot of people bash it, and they bash it to the point whereby my expectations for this hike were set so low. And actually, just like being in amongst all of the fells here is really quite spectacular. And so far, the view of the farm and the valley where we parked the car as you sort of went up and around, and then it plateaued out quite nicely, and we had a really nice long relatively flat stretch, and then you went up ever so slightly again to a ridge, and then we came out into like a new valley and the views changed again. And then now that we've gotten up into this part where we've had to do a little bit of scrambling, it's completely different again with some craggy cliffs. And so I think, to me, I was just expecting that it was just kind of going to be the same view the whole way from the way in which people described it, with not that much variety, but there's been a lot more variety than what I was expecting. The path's just come to a bit of a peak that's then let us see what the next part of this path is. And according to the OS map, if we head up this valley, there is a path to the left that is a little bit less obvious, and then there's also a path to the right which is kind of obvious but also kind of looks a little bit like a death trap. And there was one person who was like right up there, and I was saying, oh, I really want to just watch and see where they go, and we just assumed that they were going to take the path to the left, and then they started scrambling on their like hands and feet up to the right. But then a few more couples have also come up the path, and I think everyone's just kind of got here and gone, oh, that's where we need to go. But it looks like they're going to the left, so we've stopped, watch what they're doing, because the other alternative is to go back 50 meters, and then I think there's another path around that's a little bit easier. But you know, the channel's called When Adventure Knocks, and I feel like that's going to be something of an adventure, so I say let's try it. We've got up to the ridgeline that connects Broad Crag with Scafell Pike, and whilst we are now getting to see some views over that way that we've not seen yet, I have no clue what any of those peaks are called. If I then just turn around just a smidgen, and that kind of gives you a bit of an idea that the scramble is not over, and we've still got to scramble up that in order to get up to the top of Scafell Pike. This part of it is reminding me so much of the glidders in Wales and how you had to just scramble over these boulder fields. But I think the biggest difference, this has got so many cairns guiding the way, whereas when we did the glidders there was about 20 or 30 of us who were all just like, where is the path? There's also some rain clouds, which is a little bit concerning, but I've got waterproofs, but obviously I just rather that it didn't rain. Scafell Pike, 978 metres. Very good. One of the pretty cool things that people would say online was that if you do get up to the top of Scafell Pike, you can at least for a few moments say that you were the highest person in England. The only problem is that there is a memorial point on the top here, and if I just swing it around, I'm not entirely sure if I am actually the highest person because there's a whole load of people up here with me. Cheers. This is one of those situations where I definitely don't need any time to digest the experience that we've had this morning. I can say categorically that the most difficult out of the 3 peaks is Ben Nevis, the easiest one is Snowdon, and then the one that's in between, based on the path that we took up at least, is Scafell Pike. Out of the 3 of them though, I'd say that the experience at the top here has been the nicest, in part because when we were at Ben Nevis, even though it was late July, so it was very much summer, there was still snow on the ground, it was freezing cold, and it was a case of getting up, touching the trig point, getting that photograph, and then getting back down again. Our experience up at Snowdon, it was late spring, but it was all up in the clouds and it was very chilly too. Whilst we did stay up there and have lunch, we were very much sheltered behind the wall of the train station, and then I think what sport it was having to stand in that queue for about 20-25 minutes to be able to touch the trig point, whereas this one's been lovely. Yes, the clouds have started rolling in, but it's not been cold enough for me to have to get out my windbreaker, which is always great. We asked a gentleman at the very top if he could take a photograph of the 2 of us, and he started explaining to us that if you look south you can see Wales, north you can see Scotland, and if you look out to the west you can see the Isle of Man. And then even more eventful, whilst we were up there was a gentleman who then proposed to his, I guess now, fiancée, and she said yes and got very, very emotional over it all. So it's been quite an epic time up at the top, and definitely a lot more eventful than the other 2 out of the 3 peaks. Thankfully we weren't on that touristy path for overly long because it was incredibly busy. We've then taken the fork off to the right, and now we're on a path that isn't one that we took a little bit earlier. This is the one that we would have used if we tried to avoid that vertical scree from earlier, and you can see it in the background over there. And we'll keep on going and we'll see how much further it is until we join up with the point where we diverted off. We've now got back to the point where the path on the way down has joined with the path that we decided to take up. So what I would say is that if you're watching this video because you're also planning on doing this walk, when you get to this point, if you're happy to do the scree, go up the steps to the left, and if you're not happy doing the scree and you just want to join onto the main touristy path, then you want to keep on going, and then it will be that tarn that you probably just saw us walk past that you hit first. Because the remainder of the path is now going to be exactly the same as what you saw coming up, I'm going to round up this vlog here. I really hope that you guys have enjoyed it. If you are interested in the Ben Nevis vlog or the Snowdon vlog, I'll have those linked in the comment section below. And as always, if you found this video either enjoyable or helpful, I'll be ever so grateful if you guys could just give it a like, because it then helps the video to spread to more people. And we will see you guys in our next adventures. Bye bye.